So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to disassemble the MP9. First step, unscrew the screw at the front of the weapon. Put that aside since it's kind of important. Then push the spring back of the gun. Slowly lift up, make sure that spring doesn't fly out. Next step, you're going to want to take off this front latch to get the barrel out. What I like to do, hold down that spring and push in and begin lifting up on this pin, just like that. Keeping the spring held in, pull it out. There you go. Next, I'm going to take out this spring. Doesn't matter when you do it as long as you get it done. Then push forward on the back of the bolt while pulling these two latches down. That'll let the bolt slide forward fully, and then you just proceed to lift it up. Just like that. Everything else slides out rather easily. And sometimes it'll come out with the feed ramp as well. That's no big deal. You can just go ahead and slide it back in. Alright, now for the fun stuff. You see I got my high power bolt located on a C-clamp. This makes it easier to tap out the many pins you're going to have to tap out. You need a hammer and a nice pin punch. First, you'll want to tap out this pin located at this location. Don't know if you can see it on camera. Go ahead and tap that out. And that flew out was a small little spring that sits right in front of right on the impact hammer. Unlike what I did, try and make sure that doesn't fly out. You can see the impact hammer with the spring right there. Kind of fits in a small little groove. Next step is to punch out two more pins, also located on the bolt. You have a smaller one and a longer one. You got to make sure they go in the right spots. Go ahead and tap those out. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a smaller pin and a larger pin. Looking at the bolt from the back, larger pin is going to go on the left side, smaller one's going to go on the right side. So once that's all done, it's pretty easy from here. The important part slides right back out. You can release the tension on the return springs and slide off. So to get to the good stuff, like the jet nozzle, you have one more pin you're going to have to tap out right there. This one's usually in there pretty loose, so you can just kind of do it by hand. There is pressure on it, so I usually like to keep the tap I used in there as I pull out the other side. Then cupping your finger over, pull it back out. Everything else should pretty much drop out. You're going to have a spring and a jet nozzle. It goes right in there. Alright, so now back to reassembly. Go ahead. It's pretty much almost reversing the steps with a couple of things thrown in between. Drop the jet nozzle and its spring inside there and find something nice to push it down with to hold it in place. Take that pin you took out from there earlier and go ahead and slide it in. push it in as best you can. When that pin is finally flush with the cylinder, you can go ahead and put it back onto the base like that and reattach the springs. Once the springs have been attached, you can go ahead and slide it back into the main portion. And go ahead and put those pins back in where they belong. As I mentioned earlier, the two pins, there's a left larger one and a right smaller one. Make sure they go in the correct spots, just like that. Once those pins are in place, it's important to get the impact hammer back on there. Go ahead and set it just the way that spring came with it, and place it where it should belong. There's going to be a small notch to help you put the spring in, and go ahead and slide that pin back in just to hold it in place for now. Then hammer it in the rest of the way. Once everything's been hammered in correctly, I release it from my C-clamp. Helps a ton. And it's time to reassemble everything. I usually put it in like this. Everything slides in. There's a small notch on the top of the barrel portion. Go ahead and make sure that notch lines up. That'll be important for when you're reassembling it later. Now that that is all connected, to make it a little bit easier to reassemble, I usually take out the feed ramp and place it where it needs to go. There's a small notch on the bottom of the barrel assembly. And slide it right in there. Now that this whole portion is assembled correctly, I usually line it up with this right here, while making sure the feed ramp lines up in place too. So there's a small latch right back here. You need to make sure you push that forward while pushing down on your bolt assembly till it snaps into place, and go ahead and let it loose. You know it's in correctly, and you can slide the bolt just like that. Alright, next step I do is take this latch, it's kind of like this. Make sure that this portion with a small little divot right here with more, guess you can say pronounced cutout on the right side of it, goes in with that divot portion facing the left side. Just like that. Making sure that the barrel portion is lined up correctly with the small hole. You're going to take this pin, line up that front divot facing the front. Now what I do is I push in with this portion, keeping my finger on the top of that spring, while very lightly pushing down on the pin. Go ahead and release that, and it's all secure, just like that. Next step is to put the spring back in. I usually like to hold the spring in like this and slide it in, just like that. Line it up perfectly so it sits in correctly. Should be looking like this right now. You can test it out just by pulling back. Works perfect. Rest of it's from here is pretty easy. Go ahead and line up this hole, slide it into place so that spring latch goes straight into the, well, not spring latch, but the back portion, the guide, goes into the hole, and slowly just rock it forward till it sits into place just like that. And then you can easily go ahead and throw that screw back in there, tighten it up, and you're good to go. Everything works perfect.